Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening if you're on the other side of the world, as our guest is this evening. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast, 107.7 FM from beautiful New Orleans. Today, I've been looking forward to this one, let me tell you. Mark Olly returns. And of course, we're getting into the spirit of Halloween. It's the month that's all this, amazing content floating around out there in the podcast world. And we've tried to keep it interesting. We've tried to, you know, um, give you what you ask for. And of course, this is one of the topics. And I had to sort of giggle to myself because because this was already planned, and I only put it out roughly a week ahead of time because I have 3 shows to advertise per week, right? So anyway, today the discussion, of course, is the ancient beliefs in a connection between witches and the devil. And this is a touchy subject. It's very touchy with some people. I mean, there are folks who do not like to broach this at all. In fact, when I advertised this just at the end of last week's show, they're like, "What do you mean this? This isn't a thing. We don't believe in this." It's like, oh boy. Okay, so we're going to try to do this as delicately as possible. Yeah, what better way to do it than to bring on the man himself who's well researched and all about it and knows exactly what's going on, Mr. Mark Olly. How are you?
I was just thinking then, delicate subject. I'm about as subtle as a sledgehammer. Come
I
on.
know. Hi, Janie. I know. I'm thinking, ooh, I said that, but in the back of my mind's going, maybe
No,
not.
that's
I'm gonna
just
do
not
our best.
how this is going to go. But we'll do our best. We'll try
We
not
will.
to.
We always do our best. You're, what I call you, the beard of knowledge. I mean, I always know it's going to be like right to the point, and it's going to
Yeah,
be the
yeah.
way it is.
A tumour of wisdom. That's what I am. Go on.
Yeah. It's a comic relief. I like that
Well, yeah.
as well.
Let's start. Let's go all downhill from here. So there we go.
It's the best of both worlds. That's what I say. So,
Yeah.
so I have to ask, because you and I have talked about a lot of really incredible things. I mean, when I say you're like this wealth of knowledge, I'm not just kidding. I mean, you are. You're very well researched, and you have, your hand in so many different topics. And I know that if I want to talk about something, you're my go-to guy.
Okay. I would also say, by the way, if I say anything and anyone's like, "Oh, I'm not really sure about that," off you go and do your research. It's anybody that's got any doubts about anything, go and check it out.
Yeah.
Go and have a look.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I like that you've actually written a book on the Green Man and such too, because there's this connection there as well. So before we start getting into all of the origin stuff, what is your interest in this? What did make you want to research it and talk about it and so on? And
okay, I'm gonna come clean tonight. I'll start with the story. You'll like this, okay?
I like your stories.
The thing that started me off with the supernatural and everything was I saw a ghost when I was 7.5.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, in the room immediately above me here. I don't know if we've covered ghosts or not. I have talked.
Yeah, we have. Yeah,
about it before. Yeah. Well, that set me off doing all kinds of research, because that would have been back in the 1970s when you had, Man, Myth and Magic magazine, the Armada Book of Ghosts, you had Spoon Bending, Uri Geller, UFOs, you name it, everything. Yeah. 1970s, what a fabulous time for stuff to be coming out. That's how I started, but then it's like, well, how do you get from that to, witchcraft? What's the connection? Round about the age of 8.5, maybe 9, that kind of time. I had a friend who had an uncle and an auntie, I think it was, or a grandma and a granddad. Anyway, he had older relatives that lived in a neighbouring village. And what they used to do was they'd let all the kids pile around there on a Sunday afternoon, basically, and just invade the place, because they had loads of space, loads of room. They were digging tunnels, building dens. They had sheds.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, old 1930s, 40s, 50s abandoned vehicles, abandoned caravans, But it was, back then, health and safety went out the window. It didn't really matter, and we just went mental, like kids do. But then I'd already obviously got an interest in, things supernatural, the occult, etc. And I dare say I probably had abilities as well developing at that point, because, if you get rid of your preconceived ideas and you just get stuck in, you're off, you're on a journey, there's nothing stopping you. And what it transpired, and this is with hindsight, you'll see why in a moment, is that the lady of the house ran a witch coven. And the old guy, who I assumed was the granddad, had a library in the basement, and he was the magister. He was like the male element, if you like, in this circle, which gradually I've, discovered as I got older. As I got into my teenage years, that's pretty much what it was. But, and this is the important thing, I remember walking into the kitchen one day, because they had this big farmhouse kitchen on the back, and it was, windows open, sun shining in, loads of stuff, boiling on the stove, and, herbs and all that kind of thing, typical as you would expect. I must have been sort of 9 or 10 at this point. I remember walking in, and the old guy was shaking hands with this really short bloke who was wearing a pinstripe suit and a Tyrolean hat. And he was shaking this guy's hand going, "Yes, and I will see you again soon, Alex." And I remember that. The other thing that stuck in my mind was this socking great big 6'1", 6'2", blonde lady that was stood with him.
That's fair. It was like an Amazonian type woman.
Bit of a contrast. It's probably about 25, 30 years age.
Right.
And she looks like a supermodel.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I remember I either looked at this guy, or I brushed against him, or I had some physical contact with him, and kind of, wow, there's something going on there. And this lady passed some ridiculous comment like, "Oh, isn't he cute?" And kind of pulled me cheeks and left. That was it. That was it then. I didn't really make any connections. Fast forward into my teenage years.
Right.
That's Alex Sanders and Maxine Sanders, the founder of Alexandrian Witchcraft. The coven that was being run from the house where I was an Alexandrian coven. It was part of the North Cheshire ring of covens that met at places like Alderley Edge. So every Halloween without fail, she'd be up there with members of the coven. And there are quite a few of these houses that are known to have been dotted around Cheshire. And the kids just went mental. The kids just went nuts at all of these places, because there were some places you couldn't go. Like, generally speaking, you weren't allowed in any of the rooms that were ceremonial or anything like that. But the most important thing, the thing that I'm coming to that really got me started, was the old man of the house said, "You look like you'd really enjoy witchcraft. You look like it's something would appeal to you. Read this book." And he handed me this tiny little book that had a sort of green canvas cover. And I thought, oh, magic, and I opened the front of that, and it was a book of British herbalism. So that it was the book that trained you to identify things, when you were out and about, herbs, plants that are edible, all that sort of stuff, berries, fruits, that, and British, whatever it was, British Association of Herbalists. So really that got me started in a very practical way. And then, fast forward probably 10 years, well, not 10 years, fast forward to when I was 15, because at the age of 15, by that point, all this had come out, as it were. I knew who they were, what they were doing. I'd got a massive interest in the occult, because that's kind of how I was back then. All sorts of little bits of gifts and things I could do, and I was learning really fast. Then I went on. I was actually sent with a group of other teenagers to disrupt a local church youth group, because that particular church had been attacking witches, making accusations like they worship the devil. Okay, so that's, right back at the very beginning, this church was really, looking for a fight. So what they did was they sent us all to the youth club, and we did all kinds of unspeakably bad things, like, smash the place up, throw snooker balls around, break windows, damage books, chase the girls, all that kind of nonsense. That was just what we were sent there to do. But then it ended up whittling down that there was only 2 of us, and most of the fellowship was made up of ladies, shall we say. And it was suddenly announced that they were all going away for this church conference weekend away. And at this point, I'm heading towards me, 16th birthday. I think it's October. You're in October 1978. So the 2 of us being blokes, we signed up. What's not to like? Stuck in a old house in the middle of nowhere, 90% females of the same age. So we signed up and went. But when we got there, we discovered it had been a Christian conference centre for 160 years. And when we crossed over the gate into the boundary, the land that this thing stood in, that was it. Everything that we'd ever done, all the powers we'd ever had, everything just went, gone. And I suppose about 2 days into this, because I think we were there for 3 days, I had what you could only describe as a salvation experience. I decided I was going to sit in on the communion service, and I can't remember what happened. I mean, I'm really shrinking this right down. I can't remember what happened between the bread and the wine, except when I took the wine, I came back as the me that I am now, if that makes sense.
So it was like a step in?
Well, it was like, a complete flip. It was that, they call it the Damascus Road experience, because Saul of Tarsus became the Apostle Paul because of a vision. Well, it happened to me because of communion. So communion's quite important to me as a thing. And I just came back completely different. And then I started running around doing all kinds of unspeakable things with the witches and, saying you should convert, you should read the Bible, you should do this, that and the other, which was just pure teenage enthusiasm. I just went absolutely bonkers with it. So it's only as time's gone on that I've kind of realized that the snake eats its tail, i.e. you can't have a belief in evil and the occult and the devil without also having a belief in God, because that's balance. Balance. Yeah. It's the same side of the coin. So at that point, as I'm sort of getting older, things start to level out. And you know what? At the end of the day, what it came down to, and this is my own decision, this is where I'm at sort of now, and that is the stuff that we describe as magic either works or it doesn't. If it doesn't, then it's just as much nonsense as anything else. But if it does work, then something put it there. It's part of creation. It's supposed to be here. So what we should do as humans is accept that and study it and learn to work with it, etc. Call it magic, call it witchcraft, call it herbalism, call it whatever you want. If it's there and it works, then it deserves serious study. And that's sort of where I'm at now. So this is why I end up being a Christian Gnostic with a sort of a hefty leaning towards being a witch, and my high priestess, who I met in the 1990s again, funnily enough, Maxine Sanders, ended up starting a church. She went off and started a church fellowship in Wales at exactly the same time that sort of thing was happening to me. And I was involved, I mean, we met up and just sat there for a couple of hours at Landrider Waterfall in Wales, having a laugh about how funny this world is, and where you end up. I mean, Alex died many, many years before that. He died of cancer, I think, in the 1980s. But Maxine is still alive. I mean, she's quite old and not very well. She lives in Wales. But, my path and her path, I mean, even down, she wrote a book about her coven and her coven days and her witchcraft. And it's called Firechild, because almost everything you have a coven name and almost everything is something relevant to you. Mine is Snowchild. It's the same group of people from the same coven at the same time, but things like coven, craft, witchcraft, high priestess, they're labels. They're just labels for that particular form of spirituality. So you asked a stonker of a question there, which has now occupied at least 15 minutes.
It's your show. I'm just along for the ride. That's all.
So in that sense, I've got a personal living experience of the craft. Alexandrian. But then also, I mean, just as time's gone on, I have dated somebody who was Gardnerian, and she had quite a pedigree. And then I also dated somebody else at a totally different time under totally different circumstances, who was initiated by Aleister Crowley's son. So I've also got Crowleyan connections. We actually all sat down and tried to work this out the other day, and somebody sat in with me that was chatting and looking at all this, because it's all done on pedigree, who did what to who and when and how you're all connected, So I'm something like I'm 3 away from Crowley, 7 away from Gardner, and 1 away from Maxine and Alex. So I don't know where that puts me. You know, if there is such a thing as a witchcraft hierarchy, you know, I'm sat somewhere in that. So I guess that kind of gives me the right to comment.
Yeah, I guess so, for sure.
And just to cap it all, I ended up training for 3 years as a vicar, you know. So I'm also, I also a reverend. So there you go.
So why don't we get into maybe the origins, like the pagan origins, the history, before we get into, you know, the rhetoric and the beliefs and what's real, what's not. So where do witches, what is the origins?
Okay.
Shaman,
I'm
druid?
going to surprise people here. I actually think, truly, if I'm being completely honest, as an archaeologist, historian, truly, I think the origins are in Egypt. And the reason, and the most important reason that the origins are in Egypt, is because they were so even-handed and they had no idea, if you like, other than Set. They had no idea of evil as we've got an idea now. So it was equally acceptable depending on which god or goddess, you know, or temple you were serving in. It was fine, you know. And I think everybody in Egypt had some form of spiritual consciousness. You know, they were well, you couldn't help it really. You were totally aware of what was going on in Egypt and what the belief systems were. I mean, it was way out there, out front. And that's where I'm finding the origins of, shall we say, ladies pursuing their own paths, because that really is where witchcraft leans. It's a very female, it seems on the surface to be very female dominated, but it isn't. The truth of it is balance, you know. Gnosticism, Gnostics, you know, they found the way into witchcraft very early on. But that totally even-handed, open, you know, we are practicing this, we are practitioners of this in a very real sense. You first begin to see that socially in Egypt. That's really where it begins.
Yeah, I think I do think, you know, the ancient world, I think a lot of people, because of the fact that they are into a lot of the Celtic gods or goddesses, a lot of people lean towards the fact that this is very much a Celtic thing. But then, of course, we know that there are connections with ancient Egypt and the Celts as well.
Well, I was going to say the Celts are equally as even-handed.
Yes.
The only difference is we don't have as much surviving, you know, records, belief systems, etc., etc. The Celts were all for not leaving any traces behind. It was very much like the Native American Indians, you know. Yes, you might find the odd bit here and there, but you're not going to find anything, you know, to compare with, say, the pyramids or the temples of Egypt, which in actual fact are a bit of an eyesore. You know, they're a giant pile of rubbish that's been left behind 6,000 years ago. Excuse me. But that's where the Greeks got their ideas from. That's where the Romans got their ideas from. The Celts had the fingers in that pie as well, you know. So that's why I say Egypt, because the true ceremonial, magical, you know, the mystical, all the things we associate with the craft, really, you don't find them all together in one place until you get to Egypt, because the Celts are a little bit more organic. You know, they're more earthy, as you said, use the word druid. Well, they had druidesses, of course, but the druids and the druidesses would never have referred to themselves as witches by definition. You know, there's a real difference there, cultural difference.
I think with Egypt, you have all these, the old mystery schools. So many originated out of there. And this would have just been one more craft that would have been, you know, that
I mean, it might be older. It might go back to Babylonia. It might go back to Sumeria. It might go back to the Scythians and the Pazariks in Russia. Who knows where else it's going to go? So I'm playing safe with Egypt.
Well, so that was going to bring me to another question. As an archaeologist, like as an academic, as a historian, have you ever found any really, like, on some of these places that you have uncovered? And I know you're sometimes limited to what you can say publicly, but have you ever found evidence of ancient witchcraft, so to speak?
Well, there's two answers to that. Personally, I have, because you do find, I mean, starting in relatively recent, I mean, you know, 300 to 400 years ago, they started sticking witch marks on things. So as soon as you start going back in time, you start finding all of these magical marks everywhere. They're all over the place, from sort of, you know, 1600s, 1500s, 1400s backwards.
Yeah.
Then I also had a friend quite a long time ago now, about 30 years ago, who, as an archaeologist, he specialised in looking at witchcraft as a thing. So where you get cats buried in buildings, walled up, and you get bottles, witch bottles dropped into the ground and things like that, pairs of shoes and other objects on chimneys, buried in chimney breasts. He was looking at all things like that, and he had an enormous list, huge, great long list of stuff. But then if you're super critical and you really start going back, how far back do you go? Because you could go all the way back to the end of the Ice Age, when prehistoric man was painting symbols on pebbles. That's magic. The first proper jewellery that anybody was wearing were shells with holes drilled through them that appeared to have an enormous amount of value. There's a couple of different headdresses have been dug up in different parts of the world, made up of parts of animal material that, funnily enough, both of the ones I'm thinking of both came from burials of ladies. So
sounds almost shamanistic.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that if you go back beyond Egypt, then you start to look at shamanism. And the reason I say that's why I've gone for Egypt, because that's something that modern day practitioners of the craft would be able to recognize. There are very clear patterns that you can follow in Egypt. Once you get away from that, you're flying live without a net. It could go anywhere. And a lot of the things that we find in prehistory are open to interpretation, which makes it harder.
It does. It does. So, in your opinion, as a practitioner, academic, and historian,
you're blowing me trumpet today, but go on.
I know how to make it work. I do.
Why do I feel that this question is going to be a big one? Go on.
Yeah. So, well, I'll just ask this question.
Yeah.
It goes, is there a difference in witchcraft? Example, forcing things to happen, not nice, but let's say not all evil unless done in such a way, not devil worship, something that crosses religious lines.
Okay, well, that's a very simple question. It's kind of overcomplicated. Is there such a thing as black and white magic? That's the essence of the question. Left-hand path, right-hand path, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Not the magic, it's the person. At the end of the day, that's what it goes back to. It's the person. So the best way to look at it is, the world, the entire world, if you like, is, like a computer with an operating system. And at the end of the day, you're the operator. And that is, by a modern standard, the literal definition of magic. Because without the human interaction, intervention, push-pull of what we do, then in a sense, it's not magic. It's programmed. It's just nature. It's doing its own thing. You know what I mean? Because we are the magic. We are the truly magical beings in all of this. Even the Old Testament described us as gods with a little g. Because we reflect all of the things that you find in the Bible, all the magical things. So as an attribute of God, we have got the right to use whatever is here. We can use that as a facility. So really, it's down to us, whether it's black or white, whether it's good or evil, or 50 shades of grey. Then it's up to us. It's where we're sat and what we're trying to do. There is a sort of notional principle that's come about in modern times. If you send out one thing that's bad, you'll get 3 times that back. It's the law of 3. Doesn't necessarily work that way, but there is a danger it's going to backfire. There is a danger it'll come back on you, because the actual rule is that you can't do anything negative. You can't do anything dark, selfish, black magic, whatever you want to call it, without a cost. There is a cost involved, of some kind. And it might not come back the way you expect it. It might not necessarily work the way you think it's going to work. So you give it out one way and it'll come flying back from somewhere else. But then again, there's the other side of it as well. There's good intentions. I saw a meme the other day, and there's this whopping great big long list of everything, which included doing spells and prayer and meditation. And then there was all these other labels for like what the Buddhists do, what the Islamics do, you know, this, that, and the other. And at the end of the day, you get to the bottom of the meme, and it's all the same. It's all the same. It's a human being doing exactly the same thing, aiming for an end result, you know, which by definition is what magic is. You know, it doesn't have to be anything severe either. I think the trick with magic actually is to be subtle, and it's that very subtle push and pull. I mean, I don't necessarily approve of Crowley, but he actually wrote that, you know, as soon as you wake up first thing in the morning, every single thing you do is a magical act. And I agree with him. I actually agree with him. You know?
Words. I mean, words.
Well,
spelling, spell
yeah,
casting, prayer, the
yeah,
rituals of everyday life can really be enveloped and embraced into, you know.
Yeah. And then you got wishes. You've got actual wishes and things that you're working towards, things you're working for, visions, you know, long-term plans and things like that. So it's almost like as soon as you switch on in the morning, it's like you've pressed a button on that computer, you know, bing, and it's here. You've got, you know, your morning coffee, enough time to boot up, and then you're off. Everything you do that day has an effect of some kind. No
Cause and effect. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I know when you get, you know, you people, pagans and witches often get compared as well. And, you know, the pagans will tell you, no, you know, we have those who concentrate solely on whatever they worship, whatever meditation, their like rituals. And then you have witchcraft, which is more along the lines of the practice of magic and spells as in rituals for different reasons, you know. So and they don't like to be called religion. You can't. That's not a thing. You know, they're their own. I say their own way of life, their own lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right? Because a witch can be pagan, vice versa. They can be atheist, agnostic, whatever the case may be. Right?
They can be a vicar as well. You know, it's kind of it's bonkers in that sense.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole ritual magic understanding of the universe and the planet side of things, that is absolutely intrinsic to witchcraft. But on the other hand, the pagan side of it, if you like, is cutting loose, breaking free.
Yeah.
You know, it's more to do with feeling, you know, and an observation, you know. It's not necessarily driven by the person themselves, which is a blanket term, if you like, then for a whole load of different paths. You know, human beings, as you said, I wrote a book on the Green Man. Absolutely, you know, the epitome of what a pagan would define it as. And yet all the chapters in that all come from different places, different sources, you know, because it's everywhere. But it's everywhere as well as being specific, you know, it's kind of both. So like you say, people can be that because they have a focus on a, you know, Norse tradition or Celtic tradition or, you know, Native American tradition or whatever tradition, you know, they could claim that that's a pagan tradition simply because the word pagan means not the same as a biblical. You know, it actually means not the same as you, but not the same as biblical stuff, primary, you know, written stuff. So basically everything that is not really either, you know, biblical or biblical related would by definition, certainly by the Victorian times, would be defined as pagan. Although there's more now.
There's more. Yeah. Do you think on an average, before we start getting into the more belief part of everything, do you feel that witchcraft on an average has stayed the course and kept up with a lot of the ancient traditions, or do you feel that they've commercialized and moved more? Because I mean, you do have some that are very theatrical. You have some that are very, you know, they're very focused, and sometimes you never even know who they are.
Well, I've observed, and this is like 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. I've been around long enough now to watch what's going on, and certainly at some point towards the end of you know, the last decade or whatever, 1990s, somewhere in the 1990s, it kind of went like across the Atlantic and did something. It's the old joke. I mean, over here we thought Wicca was making baskets, you know, and stuff, and all of a sudden the Americans came up with their own type of witchcraft, which suddenly became Wicca, you know. And you had things like, you know, the High Church of Wicca, You had people like Anton LaVey doing his High Church of Satan, and it was just bigger, like you say, more brash, more gaudy, more out there,
more new age,
more new age, and to some extent, it bombed at the same time, because you had these books coming out about witchcraft, and you open the front page, and all it is oils, candles, crystals, and I'm looking at that thinking, okay, yeah, these things might help you to some extent, but then they might not. What about the really meaty, beefy stuff? What about, the herbalism, the health side of it, the ancient ritual side of it, the historical side of it, tarot? Even tarot only gets a passing mention, in these books. There's some real solid stuff in there, magic stuff, and a lot of it everything just went shiny. It all went pink clouds and unicorns, and everything went, bonkers, and rainbows and stuff. And so that happened in the 1990s. So now we have to kind of live with that. And it's funny because they legalized, they didn't legalize, they changed it. They changed the Witchcraft Act into the Fraudulent Mediums Act, and then it altered again. It went in 1952, and then it changed again in, I think, 1983. And a lot of the witches that were alive then, Gardner and Sanders and loads of others that I won't go into, they all said the same thing. This is going to go one or two ways. Either they want us to come out and feel safe because they're determined to wipe us out, or they want to destroy it by making it so easy and so public that it becomes irrelevant. And that's what they were all afraid of, when it was legalized and it came out into the open. That was the topic of discussion when I was, 1970s, when I was hanging out with them. Are we going to survive, or are we going to just become another, something
passing phase?
Yeah. And I think to some extent there are now two churches wherever you go. There are two churches in that sense of Wicca or witchcraft. It's split into these two divisions. I use the term church because they are fairly organized. They exist as a thing. They are quite organized. Public or private, secret. And I still think the secret covens are out there. I still think they're meeting, their own way on their own site. Fairly recently in the 2000s, I've run across Cornish witchcraft, and that mostly runs in secret, which is not surprising. But then there's the public side of it. There's all these books of stuff that keep coming out, and films, and oh dear,
Well, do you think it's just a way of, because you have people who they don't really want religion. They have certain beliefs, and like spirituality itself is it's so vast. I mean, you can different levels of spirituality. It's like they're just looking for something different, and like I say, we have pagans, and we still have a lot of practicing pagans. But then you have those who just want to do something again. We want to worship the goddess. We want to go back to something that feels like roots. Like they just want to do good, like, because it's a lot of energy work as well as it is, being connected. I mean, because a good witch will be very connected to the planet and everything that involves it. Right. So you do kind of go back to, to the old roots in a way.
You are sort of going back to where we came in at the beginning, which is what I said about either it works or it doesn't work.
Yes.
So if you wake up in the morning and you think, I really need to cheer my mood up, what can I do? I'll light a pink candle. I'll stick a pink candle in my window for the day. Well, if that works, it works. There you go. But you don't need to read a book to do that. What you should be doing is instinctively, you should know that's what you need to do. I still do it now. I move things around. If something offends me, I'll change the position of it. And, I've got, if anybody walks in, they don't usually notice it, but there's loads of witchcraft stuff knocking around. I've got a flipping cauldron hanging in my fireplace. Nobody ever notices it. Seriously, nobody notices it's there because it looks like it belongs,
It does. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, there are just some people that are just looking for that, where's the next leg of my journey? I have interest in this. Sometimes all you have is a book and the internet. There is nobody to teach you
or you can go with your instinct.
Right.
There's a lot of that historically in witchcraft, where the people involved in witchcraft have started off somewhere. I mean, there's a lot of very famous manuscripts, knocking around. John Dee left a load of stuff behind, and there's all kinds of, Rosicrucian stuff, and there's so much stuff out there you can stumble across and read, that is connected to witchcraft in one way or another. But then you start doing it and you think, hang on a minute, this is a load of nonsense. I can't make any of this work. It doesn't make any sense, because you've broken the first principle of magic. The first principle of magic is it's here, now, and it's you. And magic, this is the quote, this is a zip line, magic only works in the moment. So just because somebody did a ritual that lasted 10 hours and they did it in 1634, and they sacrificed a goat and whatever else, and they did it on this particular site and all that, even if you repeat it, it isn't going to work, because that's not how magic works. It just isn't. That is not where we're at all. But if, on the other hand, like I say, I wake up in the morning and I think, I need to chuck a few more quid in me copper cauldron down there, because we need more money, and it's a money spell. The more money in the cauldron, the more abundance that it works. And I think there needs to be at least another 3 quid in that. So I get up in the morning, walk downstairs, bang, a load of shrapnel goes in the cauldron. Right. And over the next few weeks, hopefully that is the change, whether it's consciousness or spiritual, or you've altered the world, that is the change that then has a knock-on effect. But I'm doing that because it feels like the right thing to do. I'm not doing it because I read it in a book. And a lot of, shall we say, I'm not going to slag them off, I'm just going to say witches that are further back on the path tend to rely too heavily on printed materials, and gubbins stuff. I mean, the best one of the lot was, I from a charity stall, I bought, this guy was turning wands, magic wands. They were like proper beautiful turn wooden, better than anything you get in Harry Potter, gorgeous ones. And all the money was going to charity, so I bought one. And then almost as soon as I bought this thing, this friend of mine who's quite a high up witch walked over and went, "You've already got a wand?" And I said, "What do you mean I've already got a wand? I've just bought this, this is me wand now." And, "No, there it is. That's your wand, because that will do the same thing that the ceremonies and the magic and all the rest of it demands, that you do with a pointy stick." So, and that's a good point, because that goes everywhere, wherever I go. You know what I mean? You want to do some energy work or pointing or whatever, well, there it is. And I'm just like, whoa, that's so obvious.
You are, not only is it within you, but you are the instrument.
Exactly. No you, as I said before, no you, no magic. You're it. You are the operator,
the catalyst
to the interface that is magic. That's what you are. So stuff, you can have stuff, cats, cauldrons, candles, circles, pentagrams, you name it. If it helps you focus, if it gets in the way, then just get rid of it, because it's no longer required. It's surplus requirement. But if it helps you, then why not?
So do you think, I always try to look at things through the eyes of a young child, where they see magic in everything, and do you feel that people just stop believing in magic and maybe need to look at it through the eyes of a child? Do you think that's part of it? We don't believe in the magic. You don't believe it exists. You just don't. So therefore you don't apply it. You don't believe in it. You don't know it's there. You don't know how to use it.
Sometimes I think it's even more basic than that. I think you're barking up the right tree, but I just think people forget it. They just forget.
I'm still looking for the tree, Mark. That's why you're here.
No, I think people just forget it.
I'm looking for the tree. I'm still sniffing around. So
But no, most people just forget that it's an option. They're just that simple. They just, I mean, that's the point I'm making when I'm saying, well, if it's real and it works and it's there and it's magic, and there's so much stuff that's been written about it, and like you say, children's books, movies, there's something there. I don't think anybody, doesn't matter what path they're following, Pentecostal Christian, Buddhist, Satan worshipper, doesn't matter what they are, they will all 100% agree that there's something there. Something is going on, and it's not just us. It's an external thing. It's beyond us. because they wouldn't have any of the labels they have if they didn't believe that that thing didn't exist. That's where the problems start, though, because then people start to put labels on things. Oh, that's good, that's evil, that's that's godly, that's satanic. Oh, labels.
Yes.
That's the killer. That's where the child dies. Dies under a weight of labels. And adults love boxes, and adults love labels. That's how it is.
It's society.
It is.
So in comes, is it an instilled belief system, the belief in connections, because you could get, we'll talk a little bit about, dark witchcraft and so on. You have your good, your bad, you have your balance. So when did the belief kind of switch to the point where this is the belief system? I mean, we look at Salem, we had the witch trials in England, Scotland. I mean, this is something that just followed into the New World. When did it all change?
There was definitely a big switch in the 15th century, the 1400s. So it seems to be just as the Crusades are coming to an end, because that basically kept the church occupied for 350 years. They went off from 1096 onwards. They went off, trying to get all the holy relics back in the Holy Land and all this, that, and the other. So they didn't really have time to spend on anything else. But then when the Crusades came to an end in the 1300s, they seemed to turn their attention on other things. Good example being, let's, burn the Templars. We're going to burn the Templars at the stake. Okay, so we need a reason to burn them. So you've got this list of accusations, and they're basically drawn up against blokes, because it's a list of what the Templars were doing that they shouldn't have been doing. And they burn them at the stake, and they go off and do this, that, and the other. Fast forward 300 years to the 1600s, and when the Catholic Church needed some excuse for burning witches, they wheeled out exactly the same list. They didn't even bother to change it. They just used the same verbatim list from the trials of the Templars from 300 years beforehand. So the blokes got it first, magicians, if you like, the suspicious, Templars. And then the ladies got it 300 years later in the 15 and 16 and 1700s until it was outlawed. They were using the same notes from the trials of the Templars. So that's kind of where everything sort of went south very, very quickly.
So we're looking then at a structured religion that basically instilled the belief. It's like, this is a thing, and we're rolling with it, sort of thing, and kept it going.
No, I mean, witchcraft was there to begin with because it's the continuum of all that has gone before it. So
yes.
Wise women, etc., etc. But then you've also got this massive church thing that has to justify its existence. They didn't have anybody else to go to war on. So rather than go to war, over in the Holy Land and what have you, that came to an end. And then they were, fighting all these other different people in different areas. They then chose to bring that back home and cleanse their territory, if you like, of people that fell into that category. And that, I mean, I'm really summarizing this very, very quickly, and that's essentially where it went wrong. That's where, the lady in the village that was, delivering babies and doing a better job than anybody else. That she'd just be demonized by the local church. You can't do that. You're doing it wrong. This, that, and the other. And then some point after
regimented.
Pigeonholes. Official doctors then start to appear. With medical degrees and loads of writing. And the Renaissance happens. Which wasn't altogether a bad thing. You look at what Da Vinci was doing. In the 1500s and what have you. It's great, but it then changed the outlook. Your science and your medicine and all that side of it kind of took over a bit. I'm glad to say, in many respects, we're swinging the other way. We're starting to realise now in the 21st century that some of that wasn't right.
Because witches will tell you, that we don't believe in the devil, like we just don't believe in it. So where did this all of a sudden? It's like, you're devil worshippers, you work with the devil, you're connected, this is just evil, stuff. Meanwhile, you're looking at health practitioners, midwives, you're looking at healers, you're looking at, shaman and pagans and people who just are connected to the planet, work with the planet.
Yeah. There is a
thread against the narrative.
There is a thread actually that picks up from what I was just saying, because coming out of the Renaissance, somebody somewhere, I'm not sure who it was, but one of the Templar people that's studying modern day records came across this piece of paper, and it had a word on it, and that word caught his attention because previously somebody had read this word and they'd read it as Baphomet. Yes. Baphomet, as any of the witches will know, is this goat-headed, female torsoed, goat-legged, winged, horned god of the witches. That's Baphomet. Yeah, everybody knows that's Baphomet. The first people accused of worshipping that were the Templars. And this document is a Templar document. It goes all the way back to, I don't know, 1200 and something. And it's a complaint. It's a complaining write-up about the fact that Crusaders are coming back from the Holy Land worshipping this thing which this person misread as Baphomet. Doesn't say that. It says Mahomet. So there's your first problem, because you've got people coming back from Crusade who went out there as, good Catholic Christians, and they're coming back following Islam. So that's not something that the church really wanted anybody to know. By the start of the 1800s, so the end of the 1700s going into the 1800s, a guy called Eliphas Levi decided he was going to illustrate Baphomet. And that is, in 1822, the classic goat-headed deity with wings and boobs and everything else. That is Eliphas Levi's engraving. That's what it's based on. But before 1822, that did not exist. It's not the ancient god of the witches. There are, on the other hand, a lot of engravings showing them worshipping a goat and doing nasty things with goats and kissing goats and goats turning up in the position in the center of the ceremony where you'd expect the devil to be. That is all based on the trial of the Templars. It comes out of those accusations, of fake worship and et cetera, et cetera. But then again, if you'd have, so I've gone 1800s, then you go all the way back to the Crusades, that's the 1300s. If you'd have gone back a little bit further, so let's go back to the Celts and have a look at what the Celts thought the devil was. The devil in like 600 AD is illustrated as an angel painted completely black.
That's true. I've seen old imagery like.
So what they did was they got hold of that and they just co-opted it, if you know what I mean, and it became Baphomet. So if anybody out there is thinking of dashing off to the local witch shop and buying one of these little, god figures, unless you believe you can empower a god, of course, maybe it is a god now, but that god has only existed since 1822, and it comes from a mistranslation of Mahomet. Complex.
Very complex, because it gets into, into like, there's biblical references about this, like thou shalt not tolerate a sorceress. The ancient world was full of, oracles and seers and people who would have been deemed as sorcerers or sorceresses.
Can I go let me go all scholarly on you.
Do that, because every king had a sorceress or a sorcerer or an oracle. I mean, it's like it was.
That's because the word witch does not appear in the Bible. The original Bible doesn't have the word witch. No, it doesn't even say sorceress. It uses a Hebrew word, right? This is going to make you smile. The Hebrew word of what you're not supposed to be and not supposed to do is kashaf. And what kashaf means is to mumble or write or spell out curses. It's very specific. So do you know when somebody's walking like through the kitchen and they stub the toe on the table and they go, damn it. Well, that's where we're at with it. That's the level it's at. Now, obviously, the Romans, the Greeks, all them, they were experts at doing this, and the Egyptians, and they would write things like, Jason has stolen my woman, may his bits rot off, and wrap it up in a piece of lead and drop it in a well. That's actually what they're talking about. So the idea of a witch, that word witch, doesn't appear anywhere until you get to the King James Bible, which, funnily enough, was done in 1611, bang in the middle of all these problems they were having with witches. See the bias? So that's where that's crept in. But no, I mean, Saul, who was king of Israel, goes to see the witch at this place called Endor, and asks the witch to bring Samuel, the high priest, back. And she's like, I'm not supposed to do this. You could put me to death for doing this because I've been told not to. And he's like, I'm the king. Get on with it. So she does it, and then fills her shorts because she can't believe Samuel's come back. She's like, I didn't expect that to happen. So the story's like, it kind of backfires on her. She backs out and leaves Saul to chat to Samuel, and it becomes obvious that it is actually Samuel. He's come back. Now that whole thing, that entire thing, it would be quite ordinary in Egypt. That's the kind of ceremony you would find back then, the idea of communicating with the dead. And yes, that's a no-no, because 9 times out of 10, you have no idea what it is you're communicating with. That's the danger.
Yes.
But on that occasion, it was Samuel. Samuel came back, and Samuel gave Saul a rollicking for doing it and said, you shouldn't have brought me back. And as far as you being king, you're going to have the worst 15 years you've ever had. And then that's it. Good night,
Well,
Vienna.
sure, because I think he asked if he was going to win a battle with Samuel, and he died.
Yeah. So that's a really good example, actually, of all the main ingredients of witchcraft. The witch didn't have any choice. She had to obey the king.
Exactly.
That chain of command, and she didn't expect it to work. And lo and behold, it did. Plus the fact, and this is the real kicker, if God doesn't want you to do something, then at the end of the day, he wouldn't be like that. He wouldn't say that unless the something was possible. Because God doesn't set people up. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's reality. And that's the story that shows that, yes, it is possible, and it's really dangerous, and it will blow up in your face. It will backfire. So actually,
that's an ancient story.
It is. It's about, I don't know, 1,400 and something BC.
Yeah.
It's well over 3,000 years old,
Yeah.
So you see, you got all these people running around going, oh, you can't be a witch because it's a devil worshipper. But do you know what? I'm going to go and see the channeler at the local spiritualist church and see what they've got to say. Let's see what comes through, And
it's so happy. Yeah, it happens. It happens,
whoa,
to this day, people channel, So, God, where was I going with this? It was really good too, but I'm enthralled in what you're saying.
You were heading, I think.
My head's going, I got to remember to ask this. Then I start listening to him going, what was that?
Were you going to ask how the devil got into witchcraft? Was it? I think we covered that. That's kind of where we were.
Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with that. So, because I know it was devil related.
Okay, I've got to be honest. All the connections I've ever had with traditional Northern British witchcraft, because that's what it is. Okay, almost everybody that's anybody from 1950s onwards had some connections up here in the north of England, although they're everywhere. They're all over the place. I have never ever seen Baphomet on an altar. That's just never there. Nothing to do with the devil. There is a goat-headed deity. They've got the costume for it in the Witchcraft Museum in Boscastle. But that's based on the engravings that you find, going back into the 1600s, the 1500s, and so on. And that particular deity, if you like, represents, well, not so much the devil, but the fallen, how can I put it, the fallen aspect of mankind, kind of the bad side, the negative side. But at the same time, what you got to remember, traditional witchcraft does not have black and white. They're all grey. That's it. Somebody comes out and goes, hey, I'm a black magician or whatever. No, you're not. You're not a black magician at all. You're an occultic that, would like to think he's, on the dark side. And then you've got these witches going, well, I'm a white witch. I'm a white witch. But some of the things they're practicing still overlap with everybody else. So the definitions are so blurred that they're not clear cut. Well, the goat-headed part of it just represents that lower self, that lower earthly, earthbound, darker side, but not the devil, that side in coven, because it's there. It comes in as part of the ceremony, but in the same way, it's all about representatives. It's about representation. High priestess, is the female. High priest is the male. You've got your various stations and keepers of gates. It's the whole ceremony. It's part of that. I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but it certainly isn't the devil. But on the other hand, because the Christians have got the wrong idea, people who follow the Bible have got the wrong idea of what the devil is, they're automatically equating this goat with horns. Anything with horns, if it's got horns, it's got to be the devil, Green man. The green man's got horns, and happens to be Sununos. Oh, that's got to be the devil, or goat-headed deity with horns. Oh, it must be the devil, The devil does not have horns, okay? Never has had horns. If you really want a definition, it's a snake with legs. It's the serpent from the Garden of Eden. That's, or whenever it appears, the devil always appears as an angel. Really good looking, and pops up and goes, hey, follow me, I'm great, So actually, it's a representation of deception. That's truly what the devil is deception. So a modern day equivalent might be some bloke that looks like an MP, in a tailored suit, money, leather shoes, gold rings, who you're going to believe will follow, but will take you off the rails. That's the definition. So again, it's smoke and mirrors. I suppose in that sense, the devil has pulled a fast one, because we think the devil looks like this, when actually the devil looks like this. It's smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Some little guy in red stripy pajamas with a pointy tail and horns.
Right.
Just, that's Kiddy's cartoon character. It's not real. I'm sure everybody that thinks that's the devil will agree with me, because everybody knows it's not real, really. We know it's in here that's not really what we're dealing with.
Well, so could they have mistaken him? Because Sparky's got a comment. The god, is it Sununos?
Sununos, yeah.
Yeah, with the little horns. So was the mistaken? Yeah. Was that who they mistook for and just sort of went with it?
One of many. Yeah, one of many. You got a massive cultural clash anyway. Christianity is developing during Roman times, and the Romans are everywhere, and the Romans just invaded everywhere. So you got Romans in Egypt, you got Romans in Africa, you got Romans in Europe with the Celts, you got Romans impacting the Scythians, up in Russia and this, that, and the other. All across the board, there are deities with horns. Everybody's got their own version of a deity with horns, And even, if you really, really want to insist, because somebody's going to go, I insist, there are physical representations of evil going back to whatever, but it is a representation. Even if you stick with that, it's still just a representation. It is whatever you choose it to be. The reality might be something quite different.
Right. So let's get into some of the darker witches. There's a strong belief that in the world of the elite that they have their versions of dark witches. You're looking into even countries like Romania is known to have very dark witches. So you do have, this is the other side of that balance.
Well, as I said at the beginning, and I did say this, really it's down to the person. So it's almost like you're walking in on a running buffet. You've got this buffet of all these different things you can be. Oh, what am I going to be today? Well, I'm going to, High Church of Satan. Let's read the Satanic Bible. Or, what am I going to be today? Oh, I really fancy to be really confused, so I'm going to go and read Aleister Crowley, because only Crowley understands Crowley. So you go off and you do that. Or whatever. Voodoo. Let's go and do some voodoo. And at the end of the day, the reason people are sort of thinking, well, that's black magic or it's left-hand path, is a lot of those things are fundamentally destructive, and that's your problem. And it's destructive at both ends, because the person who's practicing it is damaging themselves, which all magical traditions regard the human body as a temple. Doesn't matter whether you're black, white, grey, indifferent, it doesn't matter. Your temple, your operating system is your body. So if something damages that or downgrades it, it's going to stop you, and it's not going to help in the long run. Yes, it might work at the time, but sooner or later, it could end up with you dying. It could end in death, and then who knows what happens after that. It could even get worse. So you've got that kind of thing to take into consideration.
Yeah.
And then also you've got to say, well, do I want to devote my life to something that might not be entirely right? Because this is the academic in me that says, if there's a kind of a good, better, best, the thing to do is take the best. Always go for the best option. Nail your colours to the mast that's got the longest pedigree, seems to work the best. More people have got success from that. It's got more followers, etc. Hence, I wrote the book on the Green Man. I mean, the Green Man goes back to 7,500 BC. So you're talking about a pedigree. Now, there's something we need to know about because it is so old. It's been there so long. The Bible itself has got elements in that. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning the bread and the wine. King of Salem, King of Jerusalem comes out and offers it to Abraham. That's about 1,600 BC, bread and the wine. But it goes back a lot further than that. As an archaeologist, I know that some of these beakers and various other containers that they found that are prehistoric contain either something based on grain or something based on alcohol. So it's been there from day one. So you start to get into what people refer to as archetypes. That is something that defines the whole of that thread. If you can hit on an archetype in magic, you have a tool that you can work with that has pedigree. It's one of those things I said at the beginning. If it works, that's where you should be going. Trouble with black magic and trouble, like you mentioned, people in authority, people in secret societies, etc., etc.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, there's other agendas, and other interests involved, which may be power, maybe control, might be money, property, you name it. There's this whopping great big long list. But as I once defined, I think in a podcast quite a while ago, politics, that word politics just means I do what I want. That's what it means in the modern age. Politics just means I do what I want. That's it. That is the nature. Do what thou wilt is the whole of the law,
Yeah.
Witches have altered that. Obviously, that was Crowley's quote. Do what thou wilt and harm none is the witch one. Which, you're kind of backing up a bit here. You're getting a bit closer to what I'm saying about, well, if you're not harming anybody, you're not harming yourself and you're not harming anybody else. So that's gone off into the grey and then heading towards the white, so to speak. But that do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. That is, that's been around a long time. That really came into full flow in the 1960s. And it's impacted everything,
Yes.
That is the key to politics. It doesn't matter where you are, what country you're living in, Canada, America, UK, whatever, politics. Whenever you see politics, just read, I am doing what I want to do. That's it. That's the definition of it. They're doing their own thing.
And so, they still have their own seers and magicians. And stuff.
Well, that's the other side of it, you see, because like I say, if it works, it works. So, I mean, if somebody on, doing the stuff that's good can read tarot cards for good and they can read crystal balls and, there are astrologers that can predict what's going on in the heavens and so on and so on and so on. The same thing can happen very much like, Saul with the Witch of Endor. The authorities can come in and say, this is what we want you to do. We need to know about this, etc. The thing is, though, there's like this massive pile of confusion that's been dumped on top of some things which are still running. So there are prophecies. You could go and read Revelation or go and read Daniel or go and study Nostradamus or, Mother Shipton or whatever. Some of those things are bang on the money. They're absolutely bang on the money. But they're covered up by other things, Just spend the day, scrolling through Facebook, look at all the memes and the stuff that comes up and you'll come out at the end of it feeling you've been buried underneath a truckload of bricks. It's so much other stuff going on,
But there's a lot of ancient roots there. And I think that you're getting into, I mean, let's just, you talk about Solomon, for example, and the, the whole symbolism of everything and how he could control demons to build the temple. And, then the temple is built. And then all of a sudden you have the ark and you have people coming in and out of portals. Like, I don't know, like it goes back a really, really, long time ago. So this is not new.
No, it's not. And if you look at the designs that are recorded for Solomon's temple and the structures and some of the magical symbols that are put on there, it's obvious what he's up to.
Yeah.
But that's almost archetypal now, because you're back at the beginning. He was the one really that fully understood that the body is the temple.
Yes.
He was the one that cracked that, and that went into a lot of the writings covering, Solomon and what he was up to. Why is this man that ever lived, but he still had 1,000 wives?
Yeah. Right. I know. But even
mother-in-laws. Go on.
Yeah. No, his understanding of sigils.
Well, yeah, that's useful. That is useful. Difficult to know, though, because again, magic is magic in the moment. So something that has worked in the past. Anyone that works with angels and does angel magic will very often say, I did it perfect. Everything was fine. I used the right sigils in the right way, in the right ceremony, everything, but nothing happened. Yeah, it's magic of the moment. You've got to be so right. You've got to be so confident that what you're doing is correct. I used to be a rune master. I used to do runes.
I love runes.
But I ended up with I think it was about 800 or 900 of these different symbols.
Wow.
And some of them I knew what they meant. Some of them I didn't know what they meant. Sadly, I didn't end up keeping the book that those were written in. There might be some photocopies floating around somewhere of it, but sigils, why not? They're a bit like tarot cards. They do the same thing. They take something, some element, be it angelic or spiritual or physical or whatever, and they bring it all the way down to a single punchy object, if you like, the single sigil or a single card or a single item or whatever. That's really what they're designed to do. They're designed to focus you.
So essentially, he was a magician.
Solomon. I can't deny it. I've got to say yes. Yeah, I've got to say yes.
Yeah.
If you're looking for great magicians, on that kind of level, Solomon's definitely one, without any doubt at all. But then what about Abraham? Abraham's pretty, you know what I mean?
Abraham is about it.
And Moses, for goodness sake, Moses, he sat there on top of Mount Sinai with a stone notebook, you know what I mean? Flip it, heck. The stuff that's in those first 5 books of the Bible is mind-blowing. But, and this is again, here we go again, Moses, second only to Pharaoh, so all his materials coming out of Egypt. See where it goes? Yeah, see where it goes. Yeah.
For sure. But that's what I mean. Like there's so much information that you read about it in everyday literature. And it's right there. Like you talked about the Rosicrucians. You start getting to some of these secret societies, and it goes deep into all of that stuff. It goes really deep into witchcraft and
the modern day societies. So I'm going to talk about the ones that are here now that have survived.
Yeah,
most of them come out of that period of Renaissance. Okay, so like Rosicrucians, 1600s, Freemasons, 1600s, 1700s, modern day witchcraft again traces itself to repeal of the Witchcraft Act, but also goes all the way back to the last person executed in the 1700s, Hellfire Club, 1700s. You see where this is going. It's like there was a sort of a 200-year period where everything fired up, Druidry fired up, everything comes back to that. But they're all still with us. Most of the ones that fired up at that time are still here.
Yeah.
I would say that almost all of them, to one extent or another, are working with archetypes. They're working with primary documents, primary, science, pseudoscience, anything that works. That's what they're doing. And they are modern day equivalents of that. Rosicrucians are a good example. If you sign up for their training course, you'll get bombarded with everything that's available. There's tons of stuff out there that they've taken the trouble to put together. They pulled it all together. And again, it's about survival. I don't think we've got the full picture yet, because I don't think everything from the ancient world has survived, not by a long shot. We're almost like dogs under the table and crumbs that are falling from the master's plate. That's where we're at. We're still trying to make something of what we've got. we're actually in a kind of spiritual poverty, and we do go round in circles. It does go round and round and round. Every time someone comes up with something new or forms a new society or whatever, it's usually based on the same old stuff coming back in a rebranded.
We can imagine what sits in. I mean, you and I have talked about this before with different topics. What sits in the old private libraries? What sits in all of these libraries, like Tibet? The ancient library in Romania. What was in, the Library of Alexandria? What sits in the Vatican? Stuff that hasn't been translated. Some that has and is even being used in certain circles today.
Yeah. Well, that's the crumbs from the table, isn't it? That's the books that we've got that somebody's actually bothered to convert into the modern day. I can't remember quite when it happened, but it was a few years back when that wall came down in a monastery in Tibet, and all of a sudden they presented, I think it was 88,000 scrolls in boxes, and the monks are convinced it covers the entire history of planet Earth, but nobody can read archaic Tibetan. Nobody can read that easily. Even the monks don't know what's in there. So that's where you need to bring the scholars in. And then the question is, because this is the age-old, human beings being human beings, once they have got stuck into that library, where is that information going to go? Is it just going to disappear? Are we never going to know? Are we never going to find out? I
don't think we're ever going to find out.
I don't. And also, as you pointed out, if the contents of all of these libraries, I mean, it's 3.5 miles of Dexian shelving in the Vatican Library. It would take 100 scholars about 400 years to get through that. So we're never going to get it all. We're never going to get to the end of all of it. It's impossible. It's an impossible task. So we just have to work with what we got, which then almost takes us again back to where we came in at the beginning. If you are the one that's doing the magic and you are the one that's capable of activating the magic, then you also need to be the one that's finding it. You are your own magical antennae. You should not have to rely on a book from 10,000 years or 4,000 years or even a couple of 100 years ago. You should know instinctively, because that's how you are magically, what works and what doesn't work, and it works for you at that time.
See, I totally am in agreement with that, but I also believe that there are techniques and understanding in old, in old ancient knowledge. Like, let's just look at the art of resurrection.
Yeah.
Okay, this is still happening now. Being able to create
give it a push. Yeah, it gives you a push.
Yeah,
that old information jumps you further into what works, and But what I'm kind of saying is, in the absence of that, we are the living embodiment of magic. That's what we are. So, you could theoretically write a book of shadows that is full of the same thing that you'd find in that library in Tibet.
Yeah.
Because that library was done by human beings, and you're a human being. So, in theory, you should be able to do that. There are people out there who are miles further down certain roads, though. You're absolutely correct. They've studied things. I've met many of them, yoga and meditation and spirituality and whatnot. There are a lot of people out there that are further down. I guess that's what defines a secret society, really. Some of these people are broad-minded enough to share that with others, which is kind of like reading a library. They're a walking library. But the secret societies are not. They don't share it.
No.
Doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean
I'm sure it's there.
It's out there. You could go and find it if you knew where to look. They're just not willing to help anybody to do that.
And why do you think that is? Do you think it's just, power in the wrong hands could go badly, or do you just think that they just don't want to level the playing field? Like, what is it?
How many things can a human being have that's wrong with them? Where do I begin?
I don't know, Mr. Academic guys.
Well, it's what a question. You know what I mean? It's like power. Like I said, power, property, position. Everything you just said. It's like, you can't give a nuclear reactor to a 6-year-old to operate. It's one of those things. Is it all going to go horribly wrong? There are some things you can do in magic that there's no coming back from.
Yeah.
Because I think you dropped it in conversation somewhere. You can die from it.
Yes.
And resurrection is not something that people do every day. You know, bringing something back from the dead. And there's so much debate over that as well. There's so much debate
but it's
over
not necessarily that type of resurrection, you know, because you can get into necromancy and things. But there was an art that the Templars apparently knew how to do this as well. It was an ancient form of, you know, going dormant and sleeping and going so far down, and then coming back after 3 days, ironically.
Yeah, you can do that.
I mean, you look at the Ascended Master of Yeshua knew how to do this.
Yep, you can do it. You can definitely do it.
Yeah.
And like you said, the Templars, some of them knew how to do it, and there's people alive today that know how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, the famous one, which always used to make my head go, is, you know, some of the monks in Tibet have this thing about generating heat. So what they do is they go out somewhere that's just like 3 foot deep in snow, you know, and everything's frozen solid. They strip off, they sit in the middle of the snow, and they melt a ring in the snow and see how far out they can melt the snow using their aura, using their, you know, body generated heat. And there was quite a lot of Tibetan monks alive, certainly in the last century, that were capable of doing that, you know, because they're regulating the powers of the body. Which again, I suppose it's, you know, it's a spiritual temple. It's capable of doing great things.
But they were also not affected by, you know, all of this additional energy that we have now, like satellites, microwave energy, clarity, you know, all the towers, everything.
Yeah, they had clarity. In fact, they still have clarity. I saw a video online. I don't even know if it's still up. It might be on YouTube somewhere. And somebody was videoing something, and they noticed out the corner of their eye that there was a monk, this Tibetan monk, sat, you know, on the edge of a hillside somewhere. But what they didn't realize is the Tibetan monk had gone out there to die. And they caught the moment, and this is a true Tibetan thing. They caught the moment where he vanished and all this gold shining dust went up. Which is what's supposed to happen. They turn into light and ascend as light. And you actually see it. It's a very poor quality video, but you see it. 1 minute the guy's there, and the next minute he just goes poof, and all this gold goes up. And that's what it is. It's ascension by light. It's a Tibetan thing. So these things are out. I mean, we could all aspire to try and do something
levitation, like everything, things that you would.
Flipping heck, yeah. It's the old story, though. I mean, like they used to say years ago, you know, if a woman sees a child, you know, get hit by a car and the child's trapped under part of the car, she'll run out and pick up the car. You know, it's
superhuman strength.
And that goes right across the board. We are capable of, you know, healing, levitation, superhuman strength. You know, it's like the X-Men, but we have to work at it.
Yes, that's true. It seems as though, like, when we get into like the tragedies, you know, of witchcraft and the instilled belief systems, or guilty by association, or all of these, you know, all of that. And of course, all of this came from the ancient world into the new world. And, you know, there's still forms of it even today. I think they're just different types of it, you know. But do you feel now that maybe, I mean, you know, of course it's been commercialized, but do you feel now that there's a lot of people wanting to go back? Because I see it in Druidism, I see it in paganism. People seem to want to go back to the ancient times and really learn about this stuff properly. Like, you see people, there's a movement happening right now, I think.
There is actually an academic term for it, and they refer to it as the Golden Age. It's the Golden Age syndrome, which in a nutshell is the grass was always greener back then. You know, that's kind of the mentality behind that, the Golden Age thing. It's kind of a distraction. It is and it isn't. Yes, there are a tremendous amount of answers in the past. You know, I mean, I'll give you an example. Back in the 1960s, if a witch died, they burnt the Book of Shadows. Now, that tradition has ended. They don't burn the Book of Shadows. They pass it back onto the Coven, and they build up the Books of Shadows. The reason being that obviously we need to learn from the past. You know, we're not learning. You know, you can't burn all of that person's lifetime learning. You know?
Well, like grimoires and such, I could just keep
grimoires are the same. I mean, the flipping Bible is the same. The Bible's the biggest book of shadows ever written, covering 4,000 years. You know, that's what it is, and we can't just burn the past and destroy it. We do have to go back to that. But the reason I say it's a kind of distraction is really we need to be doing all this now. You know, now. Don't forget the golden age. I mean, there were great aspects of it, you know, but there's also other aspects of it you'd rather not know about. You know, early death, rampant disease, you know, hardships, etc. So there's some things were worse back then, some things were better. But actually, when it averages out, it's more important what we're doing now. You know, what's happening now? Who's doing what that's, you know, black, white, grey, you know, where are we going now? And the ancient stuff, again, all of these books and grimoires and whatever else, diaries, etc., are no use unless somebody does something with them. What's the point if you're not practicing them? You know, it doesn't matter if you can quote John Dee's, you know, Monas to whatever page. That's irrelevant unless you understand it and can do something with it. Alchemy's the great one. There's not a huge number of people out there that understand alchemy. But
no, that's a bit, that could be twisted. Like you really have
to. Well, it can, but you know, at the end of the day,
your mind to get in there.
Turning base metal into gold. It's just about turning base people into gold. You know, gold people. It's personal development. That's what it's all about. But at the end of the day, unless you understand that, and unless you can read that as somebody of the 1400s, 1500s, or whatever, you're just not going to get it. But if you can understand it, you should be doing it now. You know, now. And we have the greatest teaching tool the world has ever seen. You know, I don't get it. I mean, if some of the, you know, satanic folks were alive now, would they be on the internet advertising? Would they have a website for the church? Would they not be, you know, trying to perpetuate the teachings or whatever? So I think there's a fear. You know, magic is so ephemeral that it either lives or dies on what happens when the rubber hits the road. Either it works or it doesn't work, you know. And I think a lot of the societies would like you to think that they're super powerful and everything works and we've got all the secrets and all the answers and this and the other. And that's why they're secret societies. That's why they don't have a website. They don't have any way of being contacted, because the secret is they don't want you to know that probably 90% of what they're dealing with is just as much nonsense as what we're stuck with out here. You know,
but it's you know, the term hidden in plain sight. I mean, you can go back to some of the old Disney movies. You can go back to some films and you know, it's out there. I mean, I think they've always sort of given us those tidbits. And we're just looking, this is a great cartoon, but really it is hidden in plain sight. It's a thing. And they can make it look so whimsical and theatrical, and maybe in some ways it really is.
Well, depends. If you're in the Order of the Golden Dawn, you'll know all about theatre, but that's a kind of magical. That's a magical joke.
Yes.
If you know about regalia, but honestly, if that's your thing and you like bright colours, well, on you go.
Yes. No, I love it. I think this has been a great discussion. And so what do you have coming up? What do you have coming up? It's busy for you. It's just the time of year for many things, right? So
I mean, just to give you, I'll give you a hint, and then I'll give you some proper adverts. I mean, like a couple of weekends ago, I was doing a talk on the Celts, supporting the UK's first live performance of the progressive band Imaginarium at the Mead Hall down in Hereford. We have a Viking Mead Hall, and we go down there and we publicly play there for at least, you know, 2 events a year. It's quite amusing because the next one that's coming up in May, I put the advert up on my Facebook like that. 10 tickets left, you know. By the time I'd put that advert up, the 10 tickets had sold. So there's no point me promoting, you know, Progressive Rock and Aliens in May, because it's sold out. It's already gone. So there is another one at the end of next year. So I'm still doing that. They're repeating the Knights Templar Conference. That's coming up in October next year as well. I think it's the 18th and 19th of October. It's at Garway, which is down in Herefordshire. That's a 2-day conference. We just did that this weekend gone, and it just blew everybody's socks off. You want to see, you know, a room full of people who are, you know, what the hell, reincarnated Templars. You know, these people are all magical, all of them on every level, housewife right through to, you know, solicitor, accountant. They're all magical.
Yes.
But you get 70 of those in a room and the roof lifts off. You know, what an incredible event. So I'd encourage people perhaps to watch my Facebook for that. That's coming up. And then the proper advert. I'll do a proper advert, which I'm not supposed to tell you about because it's absolutely top secret. But I've just filmed 6 pilot episodes with a film company from London, and it's called Beyond Myth, and it's going to go in the, you know, the sky, blaze, quest, that kind of direction, sky history. I've got a gut feeling this is going to be like another Ancient Aliens. It's going that way.
Nice.
Because the people involved are all serious people. There's nothing wacky about it at all. Except the subjects, because I can give you some hints. We're doing Atlantis, we're doing Crystal Skulls, we're doing what else are we doing? Ark of the Covenant, we're doing Holy Grail. You know, some of the topics are just fab. And when Sky does 6 episodes, that's usually a pilot, and very quickly the 6 becomes 12, and before you know it, you're into the 20s. You know, it rolls. And I'm pretty sure this is going to take off. They've sent me a trailer. They've actually sent me a link for a trailer. I'm going to be really, really naughty, and I'm going to post the link on my Facebook at some point soon, so people can go and see. You can go and see what's happening.
I want to see that. I want to see that. That'll be
well.
Great.
That's coming up, so I'm gonna leak that in the next few. I mean, and then of course I've got other things going on. I mean, I've got, you know, out playing with my band. I'm writing books. I'm doing all that I do. So I'll do the usual advert. If you want to find out what I'm doing, come and have a look at me on Facebook. If you want to buy any of the books, because there's 8 or 9 of them out there, it's Amazon. And if you want to see any back catalogue, it's all over YouTube. Type me into YouTube. It's everywhere. Yes. So that's kind of what I'm up to. I never stop. I just keep going, you know.
No, I love it. I love it. And of course, you know, you're a frequent flyer here, so we know we'll be seeing more of you.
So, I'll be back.
You shall be back. Yes.
I will be back.
So thank you all, guys, for tuning in. It's been such a pleasure seeing you in the chat room. I love when you all take the time to come in and support us. Tomorrow night on the Outer Realm, my dear friend Nathaniel Gillis returns to talk about his dark research on the phenomena, the repercussions and risks that many people take, not only while investigating, because most seasoned investigators know, you know, how to protect themselves should they need to, but he's going to be giving his spin on things. It is a spooky month after all, so, you know, risky business, flirting with the unseen, whatever that may be. So check him out tomorrow night. Thursday, Daryl Walsh joins us to talk about the origins and traditions of Halloween. So as we slowly start coming into the last leg of spooky month, then, you know, we'll try to go out with a bang, so to speak, and there's good stuff coming, believe me. Anyway, so thank you all for tuning in. Mark, as always, thank you.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.
Is mine. Always mine. So everybody, goodbye, good afternoon, good night if you're out at Mark's neck of the woods in the UK, and we shall see you tomorrow evening. Good night.